and welcome to Sacred Stewardship from Man-Made Law to Divine Law, a conversation on the Aquarian Renaissance Indigenous Revival Summit. I'm your host, Keegan Anatole, and over 5 days together here, we're exploring a luminous spectrum of perspectives to help us transcend both evil and victimhood, showing us the way to a world of mutual reverence and regenerative relationships. So I'm super excited to welcome Bradley Logan today on the call. Welcome, Bradley.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here, Keegan. And I have this typical practice of starting calls like this with a moment of reverence and prayer. And so if you're open to that, let's just drop from our head to our heart. I call in the Spirit of God to be present in this conversation, that our egos take a vacation for this time that we're together. I pray that the discernment and wisdom that flows through this conversation would be enlightening to all those that are listening. And with that, I say amen, aho, and let's go.
Aho, thank you, Bradley. I'm excited to speak with you, and I just want to share about your background for people listening before we get into conversation. So Bradley is a founder of the Prosperous Legacy Advisers, and he's a former licensed attorney that went from successfully practicing business and commercial real estate law for decades to helping freedom-minded folks establish their life outside of the legal matrix and lawfully opt out of unwanted rules, regulations, and taxes, and to opt in to the truth of who they are, to realize their natural, true, God-given rights. Or you wrote also, if anyone wants to express God in their own way, whatever you have your term for Supreme Creator, and I appreciate that. Um,
Yeah, I don't think God cares how we refer to him. Unlike some, they're really particular, but I mean, pretty much everything comes from source. So you can reference anything and you're referring to God. So I can't imagine he really gets hung up on how I mean, I think, I'm a dad and I think about how many names my children called me. So,
yeah, I even think of it as an acronym for good orderly direction.
yeah, there we go. I like this one. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a bit more to share. You had a series of life-changing experiences and received an inner directive to transition from the way that you used to experience or that you used to use your experience um, and into a way to help move people from the jurisdiction of man-made law to the divine jurisdiction of God's natural law and or the law of love.
Hmm.
Wow. So, yeah, welcome, and I'm excited to hear what was it that that changed your life that brought you into what you're doing now.
Yeah, the entry point, I mean, obviously, I let me ask you this too, because this always informs how I communicate about these principles that I'm teaching about. But like, uh, do you have much familiarity with the Bible or the Torah, the first five books of the Bible? There's
Sure. I mean, I haven't read them front to back, but I do have a pretty good understanding.
Yeah, yeah. So then, because some people aren't familiar with, what I say are some of the greatest stories in the world. And, it's no judgment there. It's just, I get a lot of people have been triggered by this book called the Bible because it's been contorted and twisted by man and, all these different things. But the essential elements of the spiritual journey are found there in those covers from my perspective, along with many other books. But there's this great story about a man called Moses leading the children of God out of Babylon or out of the control of Pharaoh, right? And a lot of us think that that was a story about 2,000 years ago. And I'm like, no, that's a story about what's happening today. It's just an analogy or an allegory, however you want to look at it. But the children of God, that's us, are all like trying to wiggle out from the control of the government. And they interchanged the words slave and slave master, which is what they used in the Bible, to employee, employer. I mean, from my perspective, it's the same thing. And so this journey began for me when I was deeply involved in the matrix as a slave master. I was enslaving other people and having them, work to build Babylon. And when I say build Babylon, it's because it's all under licenses that were issued by the government. So I was an agent of the government. I was and I didn't know it, right? But the government was using me and my uh, the gifts coming through the creator, but they were on a shaky foundation. They were in a statutory realm, meaning I was seeking permission from the government for everything I was doing. And so, one of the ways that this became obvious to me was at the time my beloved uh, was diagnosed with cancer. And so she went to a doctor, and that's a licensed professional, and they have their licensed protocol, and they diagnose death sentences on people and make that situation come alive from my perspective, right? Like we all have some type of cancer cells inside of us, but how much attention we give it depends on how much it grows. And when your doctor tells you, oh, this is your diagnosis, and you paid him for that diagnosis, it makes it more real than it was from my perspective. And so my beloved then started like going through her mind, like, oh, geez, I just got this diagnosis, and I'm supposed to go schedule an appointment with the cancer specialist to have it uh, surgically removed. Well, during that 3 week waiting period, she started doing her own research online and found out, wow, there's all kinds of alternatives to this typical protocol from the doctor. And 2 months later, she had healed herself of this cancer. And the doctor was blown away. Couldn't imagine this to be true, but it had left her body. And so that just set me on a journey of realizing, if the licensed medical professionals are that far off base on the protocols that can be available, where else are they off base? And then I ended up at this place called Grace Grove in uh, Sedona, Arizona. It's an alternative, right outside of Sedona, alternative healthcare uh, lifestyle facility that's set up in this energy that I teach about, private membership associations, 508 churches, and ecclesiastical trusts. And this a man there by the name of Morgan Langan started mentoring me on the reality of not only is that true in the medical world, but it's true in the legal world. And so I started to see my own license at that point in time as something that was actually trapping people into a system as opposed to setting them free. And yeah, that was in 2015, and that's kind of when my journey in this realm began. And I started shifting everything I do from uh, doing it as a law firm or under man-made law into the realm of serving God and doing it and helping people find their identity as a child of God, and then claiming that jurisdiction of operating under God's law instead of man-made law. So I know
Wow.
and there's a little winded explanation, but that's kind of how I got started in the whole thing.
Well, that's wonderful to hear stories like that one you told about your beloved, and yeah, I mean, the story of healing. And in my experience, healing is about having a good flow of communication. And what your background is having to do with the flow of communication. Also, it's certain like protocols that we have as modern traditions of how the attorneys how the legal system works. And it has to do with our life force energy, right? And being taken away from us, unbeknownst to us, the traps that we fall into. And so I'm curious, being a licensed attorney, did you have access to a greater understanding about the nature of those traps, or was it something that you realized through your own journey in a different roundabout way?
Well, so I mean, are you asking the question? Are you saying that is it something that happened in the practice of law that maybe? So well, I guess there's multiple uh, pain points that kind of helped me see what I see now. And again, it started by this understanding that the medical, by the way, it's an association, right? I mean, I help people create associations now, but these are statutory associations. They're God-forsaken evil organizations, in my opinion, because they limit our pineal gland from expanding and connecting with spirit and getting true downloads, getting true information by programming you when you get that license that this is the best of the best practices. This is all you need to know. Don't go outside of what we're teaching you and use our protocols, right? And so it's difficult from my perspective for a licensed individual to break free of that program and come to the knowledge that you're now speaking about. So I wouldn't say that it was through the practice of law. I mean, I was practicing law, so it kind of was. What happened was I started to see this other way outside of the practice, and then I could refer it back to what I'm doing, and I'm like, oh, this is just not in harmony with what I understand, the law of love or what God's laws are, right? Like to have people enslaved into or tied into the matrix, I call the matrix or Babylon, the man-made legal system, civil rules of procedure, or admiralty laws, some like to refer to it. Like this is all tying us into a program, a system with the words, as you were speaking about, like, and Black's Law, right? So this is a dictionary of words that lawyers and licensed professionals use, and they're taught subtly, like you don't realize that you're being taught this, but you're speaking into existence this, this, and it's kind of ironic or divinely uh, synchronistic that it's called Black's Law Dictionary is where so many of these words come from. And then the men in black and women in black robes are the judiciaries over the disagreement or the words, right? It's all about the words and the energy that's there, right? And then going back to the reference in the scriptures in John, the book of John, John 1:1, it says, in the beginning was the word, and the word create God used the word to create the world. And that's what we do. We're made in God's image as children of God, and we are creators, and we use our words. And I think of it in three primary ways. There's the oral word, the spoken word that we use between each other. And then there's uh, the written word, which are the contracts and agreements that we make with one another, and we sign those and create a world, a language, right? Like when we create an agreement, a whole new world exists now that didn't exist before we made that agreement on how we're going to conduct ourselves. And then, of course, the most important word is the one that we tell ourselves. It just may never get spoken, but it's running inside of our mind, and we believe these words even more than what other people tell us, right? And we often don't talk to ourselves very highly. And so that's how we create the world that we live in. And when we get new orientation to those words and we start speaking life and we start speaking love, when we honor the Creator as the first authority, and then we honor His children, our brothers and our sisters, our community, these are the two primary commandments as it's told in the scriptures. Love God with your whole heart and mind, and then love God's creation or your brothers and your sisters as you do yourself. But you have to get them in the right order because you got to love God first. Because most people hate themselves. They might not speak, they might not say it that direct, but they don't see their power. They don't have their identity connected to God, or they've forgotten. And so they're running old programs. That's what the public school system, universities, the media, all of that system is designed to keep us numb and dumb and seek a license and think that's the ultimate authority and keep us from source and keep us from our true power. And so uh, I got involved. One of the things that in the law practice that primarily helped me see this is I got involved in a very wealthy family estate battle. And I saw the court system being used in such deep manipulative ways. It wasn't about justice. It's not about equity. It's just about who has the right rule at the right time to get the result that they want. And this is what attorneys do. And they do it off of their clients' life force energy, as you pointed to. And it's just a disgusting maze of that is not about equity. It's not about justice. It's not about fairness. It's just about who knows the right rule at the right time or pays the right official the right amount of money. And it's a bunch of nonsense. And so I didn't learn that through the legal system. I learned that by being involved in it and seeing it as I was getting the inputs from outside the legal system. I started to be able to see it firsthand how dysfunctional it was, right? So does that give an answer to that question? I think,
Sure, sure. And your background was, specializing in commercial real estate law. So you're dealing with people effectively working with land, right? Although real estate, as I'm sure you can explain to us, is a different thing from land, and somehow we've confused the two, and we think of this as property. And so this leads into what we really want to talk today about is sacred stewardship, in our estate, and what is the the dichotomy from your standpoint now of this difference between real estate and land and how we deal with it within the commercial construct versus divine jurisdiction and our sacred stewardship that we're moving into.
yeah. So the first thing I like to point to when I start talking about being a sacred steward is that under divine law, we don't own anything, right? This is a trick of the matrix, a trick of the system to have us become liable and responsible for something, but it can be taken away from you at the drop of a hat. And so, no matter how much equity you might have invested in a land, right? If you own, if so, I have it that we are stewards, and we're not even stewarding for ourselves. We're stewarding for the next generation. This is again going back to this scriptural reference. In the beginning was the Garden of Eden, and God put man in it and said, "It is your job to uh, take control or take dominion over the garden and live in harmony with it." So this is where reciprocity or Eine was established from my perspective. And then we got off track and we started trying to take from the land, not live in reciprocity with the land. We started to try and uh, make profit from the land, right? And if we just live in harmony with what we're stewarding, it takes care of us. There's this reciprocal relationship that comes about. And in the matrix, the man-made law started to change that perspective, and it started to have us focus on profiting from the land and taking from the land, extracting. And then they came in with their rules and they tax and they monitor and they control and restrict. And then they teach us that through the school system so that we keep running that program, which is why there's this conceptual idea of lack or fear or not enough in the world. The world is immensely abundant and there's more than enough for everyone. And the only thing keeping us from that is that most of us are living in this program of the man-made law system. We haven't like stepped outside of that into the real world of God's economy. Abundance, giving and receiving is one and the same. And so how that applies to land is that when I was a real estate attorney and I'm assisting people in enslaving into the system, like creating a statutory organization and then claiming that you own the thing, right? So I would help people set up an LLC or a corporation or even a 501(c)(3). These are all statutory organizations. So now, if you're using that, I call it a statutory organization. This is their term, not mine. It's an entity. Now, what I did add is that it's a dark entity because I believe that there's light entities and there are dark entities. This statutory organization becomes and this is what they call a fictitious person, right? And it's a dark entity that's claiming it has authority. And the authority is that it owns or enslaves land by saying that you're the owner. And I'm saying, no, that's nonsense. And yes, I did this. I helped people do that on a regular basis, daily basis. I was helping people enslave the land, seeking profit from the land. And now what I do is I put that model aside and I say, no, you represent the land. You show up as its agent in the form of either a trustee or a sacred steward, and you get in right relationship with the land, and you don't claim to be the owner. You say, hey, I am representing the best interests of this resource. And it's, by the way, it's not my resource. It's not an asset. That's a slave term that comes about from the CPA license, and they've created their own definitions. And that definition actually contorts God's laws, and it says that we're above God. We own it, instead of saying, no, we're just a steward and we're stewarding it on behalf of the creator, the one who actually created it. And we're doing it to pass it along to the next generation or God's children. This is right order. And you can't get that when you're using dark statutory organizations and entities. So you're building on a shaky foundation from the get go, which is why I believe all these civilizations keep falling. You know, they'll build up these empires over time and then they fall because they're doing it with this ego mentality of ownership and control and making a profit, as opposed to just entering into the abundance economy where there's more than enough for everyone. We're not claiming to own things, we just steward things, and we steward them for our community, for our family, for our friends. And this is the world that I now am playing in. And I'm teaching this to other people so that they can set themselves free and they can grow their communities on a on the cornerstone, on a solid foundation, on the rock, if you will. And it's not built on with a statutory entity claiming ownership, and it can be taken away from you at the drop of a hat by the government, by the tax assessor, by somebody filing a lien, right? All that happens, it can happen when you claim to own real estate. By the way, back to your point about the real estate. So this is just a man-made statutory concept, which is why it's faulty in nature, and it has you uh, plugged into the matrix, where the matrix gets to govern what's going to happen with it. That's a jurisdiction that most people operate in, but they don't realize. A lot of people don't realize. I would imagine many of the people who are going to be watching that are coming to your program, they're going to understand these things. But the jurisdiction I assist people to step out of is the matrix jurisdiction, the man-made jurisdiction under divine law, which is where you operate from a place of love. And as long as you're loving the creator and you're loving your neighbor, you're free to do whatever you want. You don't need to ask the government for permission. You don't need to seek a license. You don't need to do any of that nonsense that we've all been programmed to think are requirements. But uh, you receive this spiritual protection, this spiritual barrier block of nonsense from the matrix. And this is where people get like off their center from my perspective. They're kind of like, well, this just seems too good to be true. Like I'm gonna be protected. When what their initial reaction is like fear, like I'm gonna get crushed by Pharaoh, by the government. I'm gonna get in trouble. I'm gonna, and I'm telling you, I'm working with hundreds and hundreds of people. This is not the truth. These people are not getting crushed by the government. They're actually becoming free, and they're stewarding in a new way. And it's just a phenomenal experience to watch people blossom in this way and find their inner power and know who they are and step into a new jurisdiction. And there's a process to it for sure. I mean, it's not like, you hear about this one or two or even three times and you're free, because we were running that old program. We were living in that old program for so long. It's just like if you were operating in the Windows program and you want to go to Linux or whatever, like you don't know all of how that powerful other program works the first month or two or three. It takes some time to get up to speed. And so there is that process of unprogramming or learning the new program. And that's what I assist people to do, is just remember their identity and then start to step with power in this new identity and do things a little bit differently. Well, quite a bit differently. I don't know. It's not really a lot different, because the Matrix uses tricks of the truth, or it uses the truth, but it contorts it. It puts a little lie in there. So all we're doing is taking the lie out. Like for instance, the lie of saying that we own the land. We don't own land. You can't own the land. That's enslaving the land, right? If you own a living, breathing thing, which we all know that the earth is, that's slavery. And so if you think that you can make the land your slave and it's going to go well long term, this is not the divine order. And so that's where the trick is. Now, obviously, we do steward the land and we do invest in the land. We give to the land and we treat it maybe the way that some would think of ownership, but it's stewardship rights is the way I think of it. And you pass that on to the next generation. Obviously, you don't take it with you when you leave your body, when your spirit leaves your body. It's time to give those rights up. And so, this is the whole reformatting the way that we're thinking about our relationship to nature, to the creation. And when you do that and you step into that and you really own that, she starts creating abundance in your world in ways beyond your imagination, right? And I got lots of examples of that. I'm down here in Costa Rica living in a village that is structured under this 508. We haven't really got into the things that I teach specifically yet, but yeah, I don't want to get ahead of the questions
Yeah,
that you
that's
got for
that's
me.
that's actually leading into my next question. It's like it's amazing the power of a shift in perspective and going along in our lives with this one way of looking at things. We become accustomed to using certain protocols, like you're talking about these dark entities, and this concept of ownership and everything that goes along with that, which people know all too well. It's essentially a feudal system, although we don't call it feudalism anymore, but it's essentially.
No. Yeah,
Um,
that's how they keep us stuck in the program is they just shift the words a little bit.
mhm.
Yeah.
But so my question is, what are the new customs and protocols that are in place? And I say new, but they're actually, they're long held within our society. They've just been kind of forgotten about it. And so now you're stepping into remembrance and helping people to remember different protocols, different conventions that allow for us to be effective stewards and to have that protection from from the pharaoh, from Caesar, from the government. With it seems to be oh so powerful, and yet when we embrace this knowledge and know how to communicate using certain customs and protocols, we can have freedom again. So what are those, and how can we use them?
Yeah, well, so I've taken three specific declarations. Well, okay, let me say it this way. I'm going to compare them from what people might be most familiar with in the Matrix, and then I'll tell you about the alternative version that's in the Matrix, again being man-made jurisdiction, man-made law jurisdiction versus divine law jurisdiction. So in the Matrix, if people come and they say, "Hey, I've got this project and I want to build a community on it," and in the Matrix, I'm thinking, okay, well, you need an LLC, in some cases a corporation, but most of the time it would be an LLC. This is the best practices that they're taught. You're taught as a licensed professional, and your CPAs are taught this as well. And it's with the idea that, oh, this is going to bring you limited liability. Well, no, it puts a bullseye on your back. I mean, if an attorney wants to go play the game and go after somebody, if you're a LLC, you're easily identifiable. It's like, oh, there's a an opponent walking around over there that I can easily go pursue and make a lot of money from. This is what that means to me now. It's not what I thought when I was creating them. And why do I say that? Well, because LLCs have statutory agents. They're super easy to engage in the game of litigation. And why do I call it a game? Because just think of the words that they're using. You get served. This is how the game starts. You draft the one party drafts up a complaint and they serve the opponent. The opponent has to answer, or when the opponent answers, the game begins. If the opponent doesn't answer, then there's a default. Now, these are all terms come right out of the tennis game, right? Like, and by the way, who played tennis? This is a game of royalty. Goes way back into the beginning,
And
way back hundreds of
and it's
years.
played in court, isn't it?
And it's played in court. So you tell me that the black magic isn't at work, right? So this is what's so just hilarious to me. But they don't teach you any of this in law school. They don't teach you these things. They just put you into the program and they run you through the mill and you just come out thinking that you're doing the right thing. And so the alternative to using an LLC would be to use a trust and or a private member association. I primarily use three different organizations that are alternatives to the matrix model legal uh, entities. A non uh, uh, non-statutory or non-recorded, non-filed church or religious organization. So your spiritual energy, how's your spiritual energy? Because the spirit informs the physical, right? What we can't see, the invisible is more powerful than the what we do see. So your spiritual organization, and in there, a lot of people use this term 508c1a. Well, why do they use that term? Well, it's a man-made code law that gives it authority. It says right there below this 501c3, many people know what this is. That's a philanthropic or not-for-profit organization. So we're getting a little bit closer to God's design, the creator's design there, where we're not trying to profit off of each other. We're actually supposed to be living in harmonious relations with each other. So if I'm profiting off of you, that doesn't, and by the way, look how they're using the wordplay there. You got the prophet, Profit versus prophetic or the prophet who's actually talking about God's word, telling the truth, unveiling spiritual mystery, that's prophet. But they've conflated the two words in the English language so that we get confused. We think of prophet as like this thing. Who doesn't want a prophet? Right? But that's the wrong profit that they want. They want to extract from their brothers and sisters. So we don't work in the world of profit. That's a CPA term, taxed, extract, monitored. We use the word, we are in the gift economy and God's economy where we're donating to one another because we see value in what we're receiving. Giving and receiving is one and the same. So we no longer have clients. We don't try and extract from the people we're serving. They're members of our private member association, right? And the PMA is one of those vehicles that we were talking about. That's an alternative organization recognized in the matrix, can be used for services between individuals. It's just pride, and you're born with this right to look to your brother and your sister and say, hey, you want to do something together? Right? You don't need permission from the government to do any of that. It's just nonsense that we think that we do, but we were trained and programmed into that. So that's one organization, the Private Member Association. Then there's the private trust, not to be confused with a trust that is man-made. If an attorney drafted your trust, it's a statutory trust and it shackled you back into the system. It's still a very powerful organization. I'm not saying that. It's a powerful way to operate in the world. As we know, all the bankers use trust. Almost every piece of land is somehow tied to a trust, a deed of trust, right? This is one of the documents that they use, or a mortgage document. That's the banks playing trustee on a piece of land that people think they own. I guarantee you, they realize they don't own it when the trustee comes along and takes it away from them, which they can do for all kinds of reasons that are buried in the deed of trust document. So a non-statutory trust, I call it an ecclesiastical trust. Uh, this, which means that it's getting its authority from spirit, not from man. These are two organizations that can operate in the matrix, but they're not matrix organizations. They're not statutory. You didn't get permission. You didn't register it. And then, of course, the mother, the queen, the most powerful, is uh, the religious organization. And again, I hesitate when I say this every time I say it because the words like religion and church, these are trigger words for a lot of people, including myself. Now, I use them with consciousness though. I'm not talking about the man-made religion. I'm not talking about the Baptist church or the Mormon church or the Catholic church. These are all 501c3 statutory organizations that are mimicking true spiritual understanding from my perspective. And so I assist people in claiming that spiritual understanding for themselves by creating their own spiritual organization. And then you can attach that to the term 508c1a, which is the matrix code that says that a spiritual organization is outside of our jurisdiction, right? So, meaning the man-made jurisdiction. So, when people have the knowledge and understanding how to operate a spiritual organization, and then its integrated auxiliaries, which would be the PMA and the trust, they're free to operate in the world outside the Babylonian system. And these are the three organizations that like if I was an attorney, when I was an attorney, I would have created a 501c3 for tax shelter purposes, uh, trust, because a trust is a powerful way to hold resources, or in the matrix we call them assets, but in under God's law we put them in right relationship. They're not assets to be taxed and extracted. Asset by definition is under the jurisdiction of the government. Resource, if it's a natural resource, that's by definition under the jurisdiction of the creator. And so when you start managing resources instead of assets, you've stepped outside the jurisdiction of man-made law. And they recognize this. They know this, right? And they don't even mess with you. And if they do mess with you, you can shut them down real quick if you know what you're doing. And so, and how to respond and what to say. And you certainly aren't going into court. It's all administrative responses. It's letter writing. And so giving your testimony, right? This is all you're doing is you're giving your testimony that, hey, look, I recognize and understand your matrix system. I'm not a part of that. I didn't sign up for that. I didn't seek your permission. I don't have any licenses. I'm operating in a different jurisdiction and you have no authority here. And so this is how we do that. The 508 organization, 508c1a styled organization, your religious organization, your spiritual organization, the non-statutory trust, ecclesiastical trust, and then the private membership association, private member association. With those three organizations in place, I guide and lead people into understanding how they can, bring forth their God-given gifts, whatever gift they channel, and it can be establishing a land project or a community, but it could be, healing modalities. I mean, I have licensed professionals making this transition, like CPAs, like helping people steward their resources, which is what a CPA is supposed to do. Like a doctor is supposed to help people heal, but he can't talk true truth about God's plans and alternative realities, things outside of his association's best practices he's not allowed to talk about, or he'll lose his identity. They'll yank his license, and maybe he can even be found to be uh, a criminal in nature if he violates the association's protocols, right? So we push all that to the side and we say, no, look, if I'm coming from a place of love, I'm doing no harm. I'm only benefiting my community. I can do all that, but you can't do that in statutory organizations because they interfere and they govern and they rule. You have to create your own organization or a non-statutory agreement. That's really all these things are. And we put fancy words on them so people can wrap their mind around it. But uh, it's a way of being. It's a way of knowing and claiming your identity at all times, giving your testimony that what you're doing isn't under man-made law, but it's under God's laws. It's under the law of love. And so this is how that journey goes for the people that I'm working with now.
That's beautiful. I love how that there's a comprehensive kind of nature to your whole scheme of things and your arrangement. And I'm wondering how once people can understand these tools and start to really get their ducks in a row to have the invisible structure set up, then from your experience, how can we step into sacred stewardship? Like, I mean, let's stick with our relationship with the land. Like, what do you see for us going forward? Moving into territorial jurisdiction, into our natural connection, with the divine, and operating as stewards, living and breathing from that place. And how can we engage and fulfill our sacred stewardship with the earth?
Yeah, so it comes back to the word, right? So I believe that we are creators, made in the image of the creator. And the way he taught us to create is by using our word. So the more integrity that we are operating from when we speak a word and say, hey, this is what's going to happen, and then we make sure that that is what happens, the more often we do that inside of our spirit starts to connect with, oh, when I speak, that thing happens. So this is what we're constantly practicing, being conscious with our words. We get rid of this matrix driven. I mean, the matrix is so designed to support lies, right? Like we know that those that are telling the truth get deplatformed. They get scorned. They're removed. They're called outlaws. Like I think a couple of years ago, sovereign people who were claiming to be sovereigns or the sovereignty movement was classified as the new terrorist, right? And so that whole ideology of telling the truth and then honoring your word, it's not blatantly uh, hushed in the Matrix, but it is. I mean, like the underlying tone is, you people pleasing, just going along with the flow to keep the peace. All of that is out of integrity. Speaking the truth in love is in integrity, and so this is what we do. We have a monthly member. I'm sorry, a weekly meeting in our community at Prosperous Legacy Advisors, which is my private member association that we established, where we do what you're talking about. We get together and we remind each other of the truth. Because sometimes you're going down this journey, stepping out of the matrix, your friends and your family are looking at you like you're nuts, you know? And then that starts to bring the fear back up. It's like, okay, am I doing the right thing? Am I getting misled here? Right? And so we need to reaffirm each other and we need to tell each other the truth and we need to practice giving our testimony. So we share why we're doing these things, why we're stewarding land in this new way. How are we engaging with the people that are on the land in a new way? And we often use the private member agreements, private member association for the engagement amongst the people that are on the land, right? So again, nobody owns the land. We're just stewards of the land. So oftentimes the land is going to be held in a trust. And then you have people come in that want to steward the land and they can do that inside the private member association. And so when I was practicing law, I used to create homeowners associations as a real estate attorney. Now, forgive me for that, but how funny is it because I mean, if you've ever lived in a homeowners association, you know it's not so fun. And it's a trick. They make you think it's gonna keep your value of your real estate high by painting all the houses the same and making sure that your neighbor doesn't park a car on the driveway, for too long and all these stupid little rules. I got involved in lawsuits where a neighbor is suing another neighbor because the dog pooped on the yard, right? Like, and so it's just silly little things like this that pit people against each other instead of living together in harmony. So in a private member association, there's not a lot of rules. It's not, it's more about a commitment to live with your neighbor in love. And then you work out the things. However, and things change all the time. Like there may be a time when you don't want, you know, uh, there may be a time when you don't want certain activity occurring in the community that you live in. That's okay. I mean, a PMA, another way to say it, PMA is the right to discriminate. But you're not discriminating for stupid reasons like people's age or their color or their sex. You're discriminating because you want to live with people who are in agreement with living under divine law, that live in according to loving principles, not these man-made constructs that initially look like love, which is I'm only going to paint my house from these color palettes, like because we want our community to look great. Now, I'm not going to know my neighbor. I'm not going to engage with my neighbor, but we're going to look like we do because we all look the same. Like it's just stupid what they do in these homeowners associations. And so now, with that background and understanding of how to do it wrong, I assist people on how to do it right in a PMA, not a HOA, right? And so these are the ways that we assist people. And what I say is, we created a annual Trinity journey, and that's for people to understand you don't just get this in a couple of conversations. This is a new way of being. You have a long program that you're unwinding from or disassociating from and stepping into a new one. And the way to do that is have lots of conversation. Give your testimony over and over, not just when you need it. If you're only giving your testimony when you're being approached by agency and they're questioning you, you're in trouble because you can't. They know how to attack people because remember, it's a game. They're playing the game by their set of rules, civil rules of procedure. You're playing the game by a new set of rules that they don't even know, right? See, they don't know about divine law because they only know about statutory law. So they come in with fierce force and think that they're right and they attack you, or you feel like it's an attack. But if you remember, we're playing a game. We're playing a game of chess. I love to use the chess analogy in how we assist people in stepping out of Babylon. We don't play that court game anymore. We're playing on a kingdom board, the board of the kingdom, and we're protecting the king, which is again the king doesn't really in the game of chess. You play? Are you a chess player?
I can't say that I am. I have
Okay,
played
but
before.
see, my analogies fall flat with people that don't know the game that well. But
I know. I mean, I know. I understand the game.
yeah, well, so you
Haven't
know that
played it
the
in a while.
yeah, the queen is the super powerful player on the board. She can move with all this ambidextrously and all over the place. She's protecting the king, his lame butt. He can only move one. That's the weakest move player on the board. Even a pawn can, move a little more fancy than the king can. So, and, he can go. But my point is, I mean, the pawn can make two steps at once. The king can only ever move once. And and the point is that the whole game is designed around protecting the king and capturing the other king. And so the queen is that spiritual organization. The bishop is the PMA, and the pawn, I mean the castle, the rook, the lighthouse on the corners of the board, looking out over the kingdom. That's where you store your resources, right? And the castle protects them. And then the bishop is running around engaging with the people, So all these analogies are right there in that chess game. And after just a few moves from each side, 3 moves from each side, Google says there's 8 million options on that seventh move in the game. And so what I tell people that are coming into this and learning about these new ways of being is there is not a method. There is not one way to do it. It's not about that. And so many teachers in this space today want to teach their method. What I'm help assisting, I start with a method. I start by helping people learn how to utilize these 3 very powerful agreements or declarations, and they're just reframing their world. You're claiming a new jurisdiction. And the declaration is not with another individual, it's with the creator. And you're saying, hey, I'm going to steward all that you're entrusting me as a child of God with in a new way. And I'm going to move in new ways of being. And there's all kinds of ways to do that. There is not just one. When you can give your testimony and you're coming from a place of love, you can move any creative way you want. And then all you have to do is be able to back that up with your testimony that it was in harmony with God's laws, with the Creator's laws, rises above man made laws. You don't need to listen to their laws if you're not asking for their permission. You're not using their tools. You can do it however way we deem fit. And that's what we get to do every week is just create new ways of stewarding what God has entrusted us to steward.
That's beautiful, and I love the the comparison between the PMA and the HOA, and you can really see that it's the childish way that we've been behaving instead of having direct communication with one another and working things out and figuring it out. We're calling on like mommy, daddy, government to come and to turn our rights away and to there to be an arbitration, right, um,
Yeah.
and judgment from our man-made authority figures, right? Um,
They're an energy block. That's all they are. Yeah.
mm. So I just want to ask you one more thing, which is this is a spiritual transformation of the perspective, and uh, you're bringing people together, and you mentioned that it's it's ecclesiastical. So from like a spiritual perspective, how is it that that people uh, are um, creating maturity and starting to engage with each other no longer as children, right? I mean, you're saying we're children of God, and yet also we're moving into a maturity where we can actually handle our own affairs instead of always calling on the referee, right?
Yes.
Eh,
Yeah.
yeah. So how do you see that unfolding? How is it a spiritual process people are going through, engaging with one another within your community?
Yeah, great question. So it starts with the creation of those documents because those are declarations and we go through a process together. Like I don't just, write a document and send it to somebody and say, "Hey, sign this." Like it's a co-creation. And so we go through uh, changing the words to match with the individual's expression, the individual's declaration of how they view source, how they view their creator, right? I don't want people regurgitating my I mean, that's what a lawyer did. That's why you got to keep going back to your lawyer whenever you start to feel like you're about to get in any type of trouble. People don't know what to do. So they go run back to the lawyer. The same thing in the medical industry. You start to, if people would take more responsibility for their own health, they'd be a whole lot healthier than if they were abdicating the responsibility to a doctor who gives them a diagnosis that's coming from a death book, right? Again, another association, American Medical Association is running the healthcare program. And by the way, that's funded by the insurance. So I think of it as it's not even medical or health care, it's insurance care. You get, if you're signed up with an insurance plan and you go to a doctor, you're going to get something that fits their codes. Isn't it? There it is again, by the way, man-made codes. And because they know that you want to claim the insurance, you don't want to be responsible and come out of pocket for anything. And I can't blame people for wanting to pay doctors a normal, astronomical amount of money to tell you what's wrong with you when they only get to visit with you for like what, 15 minutes? I think the insurance will only pay 15 minutes to visit with his client or with his patient. And then he's got to put a code on him and prescribe some medication, pharmaceutical licensed industry. You see how that's all stuck together? And so we just step outside of that with these declarations and we say, hey, we're not going to use the man-made legal system anymore in the way that they have designed it to be used by us when we're slaves. So you become aware of the program and you make a vow, a declaration to step out of it. And then you start using your words. Like we have this game that we play in PLA when we get together on these weekly calls. If we're using words that are matrix terms unconsciously, now obviously we use them with consciousness, but if you're just, oh, well, my business generated $10,000 last month. I go, ding, because you're not running a business anymore. You were programmed into thinking that you were running a business so that they could tax, extract, monitor, and track it. By definition, a business is in the jurisdiction of the matrix and they have authority over it. If what you're doing, and this is where the work really comes in, is I assist people in seeing what their God-given gift is that they're delivering to their brothers and their sisters in a different way. My guess is you're only calling it a business because that's what you were trained to do by your professional. If you say and refer to that thing that you're doing as a service to your brothers and your sisters, now you see how you can receive donations for the service, for the value that you're giving to your brothers and your sisters. So again, it's all about just playing with our words and at first you're faith we got this term, we faith it until we make it, because it doesn't feel like you're really, if you're doing the same thing that you've been doing for the last 10 years, which was a business, but now you're doing it in a PMA, and I'm telling you it's not a business anymore, it doesn't automatically, instantly feel congruent. And I'm here to say the longer you practice cleaning up the words, the less you use of the matrix terms, the more words you use that are correctly identifying what you're really doing, the stronger your testimony becomes. The less fear you have, the more you know that you could stand up in the face of any opponent in the game of chess, the agencies come knocking on the door, and the more you can express to them, give your testimony, that what you're doing is not under their jurisdiction. You're actually in service to a higher source, and you don't need to listen to them. And as long as you're not causing harm to your neighbor, it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. And so all we're doing is having those conversations over and over, saying it in different ways, listening to other people that are along the journey too, and they're telling their story about, oh, yeah, when I was just, doing this my first month or two, it didn't make sense. I didn't know what I was doing. And I'm like, really? I'm running a church. It doesn't feel like I'm running a church. And you're not running a church, but you don't have to run a church to claim spiritual authority. You don't have to. That's the matrix way of, and we teach people and assist them on learning how you can give your testimony that still keeps you under the jurisdiction of divine law, even if you're not operating a huge church. Nobody said that your church has to be huge. There's startup churches all around the globe, little tiny churches. They still are not under the authority of the government. If the person who's operating it hasn't set it up as a 501c3 and registered it with the government, and they're standing in their power and they're speaking their truth. And this is all we do is we just have these conversations. And when people are having doubt or questions about, you know, am I doing this right? We walk through together on what they're doing, how they're doing it, and how they can clean up the language so that if it wasn't feeling right, they can make it feel right because you're just giving your own personal testimony. And so this is how that journey goes when we're doing that dance together, which is why I no longer just, I don't, I only, you can't hire me. You can't, I don't have clients. We find value in being together in an association, and then we'll ask for dues and you can give us donations, and then I just provide a service, and then God takes care of the rest.
Beautiful. I love the simplicity of that, and the bringing people together that you're doing. Thank you for sharing all your perspectives today. And I understand that you have a gift, a 5-hour masterclass for people to dive deeper into some of these teachings. Do you want to
I
share
do, yeah.
about that?
Yeah, it breaks apart there's an hour on each of those three chess pieces I call them, the queen, the bishop, and the rook. And then there's an hour on the king. This is the most critical role, right? And then there's just so it's five different teachings. We put them all into one package, and it will give people a great understanding, a much deeper understanding of these principles if they're new to these concepts. Um, yeah, so that is my gift to you and to your people that are watching. And yeah, I look forward to spreading this word with the world. This is my dharma. This is my calling. This is my gift. This is what I'm just an open vessel and a channel to bring this message to people, kind of like cleaning up all that yuck I did as an attorney, enslaving people into the system now. And I, just shining light on a path for people to walk into freedom and into their power.
Thank you so much for sharing that and for doing everything you're doing. Uh,
Yeah.
it's a pleasure to see that and to be connected with you.
Well, my privilege and my honor, and I thank you, Keegan, for this platform to be able to speak this to the world. And yeah, all the best on your endeavors and what you're up to as well. I look forward
Thank
to
you.
seeing you in the flesh again here soon, whenever that's in divine alignment.
Thank you, Bradley. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Lots of love.